Unspoken Breadbox Rules. Every 1950s mother knew that kept bread from going to waste. Strongest. Number 11. The lid open rule. The first rule was not written down. She opened the lid. Jean's yellow bread box sat on the counter because bread was not supposed to vanish. It was supposed to be seen. Before the children came down for breakfast, before the grocery list was written, before anyone said, "We need bread," her hand went to the metal handle. That small act was inventory. In a 1950s kitchen, bread was a daily staple, not a hidden backup item behind 3 plastic bags and a delivery receipt. A loaf had a place. It had a visible level. It had a beginning, a middle, and an end. When Jean opened the box, she knew whether toast was possible, whether sandwiches could be made, whether the heel needed using, and whether the next store trip actually needed another loaf. The mechanism was simple behavioral economics before anyone in the house called it that. Visible food gets used. Hidden food gets forgotten. A bread box made the loaf interrupt the routine before the shopping did. Modern life replaced that little inspection with app carts, pantry overflow, bulk deals, and plastic-wrapped loaves that can disappear behind other packaging until the smell gives them away. The old system started with looking. The modern one often starts with buying. The bread box did not remind her to shop. It reminded her not to. Number 10. The heel slice rule. The heel slice was not trash. It was a bookmark. When Jean opened the wrapper, the end of the loaf had a job. She did not automatically throw it away because it was darker, tougher, or less popular with the children. He turned it inward, pressed it against the cut face, and let it stand guard over the softer slices behind it. This mattered more after sliced bread changed the kitchen. Commercial sliced bread first appeared in 1928 in Chillicothe, Missouri, using Otto Rohwedder's slicing machine. It was a marvel of convenience, but convenience came with a problem. Once bread was sliced, more surface area was exposed to air. More exposed surface meant more moisture loss, faster firming, and more chances for the loaf to feel old before it was truly unusable. The heel was crude, but it was logical. It acted like an edible shield. It slowed the drying of the next slice. Then, when its turn came, it could become toast, crumbs, or part of supper. The least wanted piece became the piece that protected the rest. Modern packaging sells that same promise with plastic seals, clips, twist ties, resealable bags, and freshness language. The plastic bag packaged bread segment was valued at about $180.7 billion in 2024. That is a very large market built around keeping a loaf acceptable a little longer. Jean's version was already inside the loaf. The first freshness seal was a slice nobody wanted. Number 9. The paper wrap rule. She did not suffocate every loaf. Inside the bread box, Jean folded the paper with care. Not tight enough to trap dampness. Not loose enough to let the bread dry out before supper. The motion was small, almost invisible. Tuck, press, close the lid. That was the bread box rule modern packaging made easy to forget. Bread storage is a balance between air and moisture. Too much air dries the crumb and hardens the slice. Too much trapped warmth and moisture can encourage spoilage. The old method did not pretend bread could live forever. It tried to keep it useful long enough for the household to finish it. Early sliced loaves needed wrapping to hold their shape and protect the cut surfaces. Mid-century kitchens still understood bread as something that changed day by day. The wrapper was not magic. It was a judgment call. Modern life turned that judgment into a product feature. plastic bags, twist ties, bread clips, resealable closures, freshness panels, and packaging designed to reassure the buyer at a glance. Quick Lock traces its closure history to the 1950s, when Floyd Paxton developed a better way to close bags. The company later grew into an international packaging name. There is nothing wrong with a good closure. The problem is when the closure replaces the habit. She did not need a freshness promise. She needed air, shade, and judgment. Number 8 is where the bread box accidentally understood science. Number 8. The no fridge rule. This is where the old kitchen accidentally understood food science. Jean had a refrigerator. She did not treat it like the answer to everything. The loaf stayed in the bread box for ordinary use. If bread needed saving for longer, freezing had its place. But the refrigerator was not automatically where the daily loaf belonged, because cold is not one simple thing. It can slow some kinds of spoilage, but it can also make ordinary bread seem stale faster. Bread firms partly because of starch retrogradation, a process where starch molecules reorganize after baking. A 2011 study comparing storage conditions found the highest retrogradation rate at 4 degrees Celsius among the tested temperatures, while storage at -18 degrees Celsius behaved differently over the study period. In plain kitchen language, the refrigerator could make bread feel old faster, while freezing was a different tool for longer storage. Jean did not need the chemistry words. She knew the result by touch. The counter bread box kept the loaf in the rhythm of meals. The refrigerator made it feel protected, but protection was not always the same as quality. Modern kitchens now have freezer bags, storage containers, freshness gadgets, and advice scattered across labels, blogs, and videos. The old rule was quieter. Keep today's bread where today can see it. Of course, heat, humidity, ingredients, and mold risk still matter. Moldy bread should be discarded. The point is not to worship the old kitchen. It is to notice that the old kitchen often separated short-term use from long-term storage more clearly than we do now. The modern appliance was not always the modern answer. The bread box was not primitive. It was a small climate, a small limit, and a small daily decision. The lid, the heel, the paper, and the counter all worked together. Not perfectly. Not scientifically in language, but practically through repetition. Modern packaging did not have to prove the old habits were useless. It only had to make them look unnecessary. Once the loaf was sealed, clipped, bagged, hidden, and replaceable, the kitchen lost something quieter than freshness. It lost the habit of noticing. Number 7. The toast first rule. A dry slice did not become garbage. It became breakfast. Jean could feel the difference before anyone complained. The bread had lost its softness. The edge bent less easily. The children might have rejected it in the sandwich. But beside the bread box sat the toaster, and that changed the sentence. Stale was not spoiled. Stale was a stage. By the 1950s, electric toasters were familiar counter-appliances in American kitchens, appearing in department store ads and breakfast routines right beside coffee, butter, jam, and eggs. Jean did not need a new product because the slice had dried a little. She slid it into heat. The mechanism made sense. Bread that is firmed from starch changes can feel more pleasant when reheated. Toasting drives off surface moisture, crisps the outside, warms the crumb, and gives a dry slice a new job. It does not make unsafe bread safe. Moldy bread still belongs in the trash. But a firm, clean slice could become toast, grilled cheese, French toast, or something to dip into soup. Modern breakfast aisles sell around the same morning problem with toaster pastries, frozen waffles, breakfast bars, packaged sandwiches, and delivery coffee orders. Useful? Sometimes. Convenient? Absolutely. But the old kitchen solved many mornings by asking one question first. Can yesterday's bread still work? Gene did not rescue bread with branding. He rescued it with heat. Number 6. The crumb tin rule. The crumbs had a container before snacks had an aisle. Somewhere near Gene's bread box there was likely a small tin, a jar, or a folded paper packet that held what modern kitchens often sweep away. Dry ends. Broken toast corners. The last hard piece nobody wanted for a sandwich. He did not see failure. She saw texture. Mid-century American cooking leaned heavily on binders, toppings, fillers, and stretchers. Cookbooks of the period, including the 1950 Betty Crocker picture cookbook era of home cooking, treated crumbs, stuffing, casseroles, meatloaves, and breaded cutlets as normal household food logic. A dry slice could be grated. A crust could be saved. Crumbs could go into meatloaf, over macaroni, into stuffing, under a cutlet, or across a casserole top before it browned in the oven. The mechanism was humble, but strong. Dry bread absorbs moisture. It binds loose mixtures. It stretches meat. It gives crispness where a dish might otherwise be soft. It turns a fading loaf into structure. Modern stores sell that same function back in cardboard tubs, seasoned breadcrumb canisters, boxed stuffing mixes, crouton bags, coating mixes, and salad toppings. The aisle did not invent the crumb. It standardized it, flavored it, packaged it, and priced it as a separate thing. Gene's crumb tin was not glamorous. That was part of its intelligence. It turned the evidence of use into the beginning of another meal. The product was once proof that nothing had been wasted. Number 5 is where the old routine stops looking quaint and starts looking sharper than the modern aisle. Number 5. The buy one loaf rule. One loaf in the bread box told the truth. 3 loaves hidden in plastic told a story. Gene's kitchen did not have infinite shelf fantasy. The bread box had a limit, and that limit mattered. If the loaf was half full, the answer was not another loaf. If the heel was still there, the answer was toast. If the slices were getting dry, the answer was crumbs or supper. The box quietly corrected the grocery list. In 1955, historical price tables list bread at about 17.7 cents per pound. That was not nothing in a household budget. It was small enough to buy often, but visible enough to respect. A mother did not need a spreadsheet to understand that a loaf thrown away was not savings. It was breakfast, lunch, and supper that had been allowed to disappear. The mechanism was simple. Smaller visible inventory reduces overbuying. When food stays in sight, the household adjusts. When food hides in bulk bags, deep shelves, delivery extras, and just-in-case purchases, waste becomes easier to overlook. Modern convenience often encourages the opposite rhythm: multi-loaf deals, warehouse packs, delivery minimums, app carts, and plastic-wrapped backups. At the national scale, FDA and USDA-related estimates have placed U.S. food waste at roughly 30 to 40% of the food supply. That does not mean every household is careless. It means the modern system makes excess feel normal before it becomes visible as loss. The uncomfortable truth is not that modern shoppers are foolish. It is that modern convenience often removes the small limit that used to protect us from our own good intentions. The bargain was not cheap if half of it turned green. Number 4. The mold means stop rule. The old rule was simple because the risk was simple. Jean opened the lid, looked at the loaf, and made the decision before a printed date had to make it for her. If the bread was dry, it could become toast. If it was hard, it could become crumbs. If it showed mold, the rule changed. Stop. This is where nostalgia needs discipline. Old kitchens reused bread, but good old knowledge was not the same as pretending spoiled food was fine. Bread is porous. Mold can send threads beyond the spot the eye can see. USDA food safety guidance has long warned against salvaging moldy bread by cutting around the visible part. The safer rule is to discard it. The bread box helped because it made inspection normal. The loaf sat where a hand could touch it and an eye could judge it. Spoilage did not hide forever behind a second plastic bag or under pantry clutter. Jean did not need to debate whether the label meant best by, sell by, or use by. He looked at the food itself. Modern packaging added helpful protection, but also more distance. Sealed plastic, freshness windows, printed dates, and consumer confusion. The FDA's recent attention to food date labeling shows how much waste and uncertainty can gather around words on packaging. A label can help, but it cannot replace judgment. The old system did not ask anyone to eat unsafe bread. It asked the household to notice sooner. The bread box made the decision visible before the label made it confusing. The final three are where this stops being nostalgia and starts looking like a business model. Number 3. The freezer when needed rule. Number 3 is where convenience starts to look more expensive than helpful. Jean did not treat the freezer like a hiding place. If the loaf was going to be used that week, it stayed in the bread box where the family could see it. If extra slices truly needed saving, then she wrapped them with intention and froze them for later. That difference mattered. Freezing bread is not the same as forgetting bread. USDA food safety guidance says food kept continuously frozen remains safe indefinitely, though quality can decline over time. And the same 2011 bread storage research that found faster retrogradation around 4 degrees Celsius also showed that minus 18 degrees Celsius storage behaved differently, helping preserve certain quality measures more steadily over the study period. The old method had a quiet hierarchy. Bread box for now, freezer for later, trash for mold, store only after checking. Modern life blurred those categories. Bulk loaves come home because they feel cheaper. Freezer bags, plastic wrap, storage containers, warehouse packs, and oversized pantry habits arrive afterward to manage the excess. The storage system is sold after the shopping system encourages too much. A freezer can be useful. It can prevent waste when used deliberately. But it becomes a confession when it fills with bread nobody remembers buying. Jean's freezer was not the first step. It was the backup plan. The freezer worked best when it was a decision, not a confession. Number 2. The stale bread supper rule. This is the part that sounds poor until you realize it was intelligent. Jean did not look at the last slices and see embarrassment. She saw bread pudding, stuffing, meatloaf binder, French toast, soup thickener, a casserole topping that would brown in the oven while the kitchen smelled like butter and onions. Stale bread had a second life because the household gave it one. Mid-century cookbooks made this normal. The 1950 Betty Crocker picture cookbook belonged to a world where crumbs, binders, stuffings, puddings, and casseroles were not side tricks. They were household architecture. A slice that had lost sandwich softness still had structure. Dry bread could absorb milk, broth, egg, meat juices, or soup. It stretched protein. It thickened supper. It turned decline into usefulness. Modern industry sells many of those second lives separately. Boxed stuffing, seasoned croutons, breadcrumb tubs, frozen French toast, prepared casseroles, meal kits, and snack products built from the same basic idea. The old kitchen used what was left. The modern aisle often sells a polished version of what was left. This is where the numbers become uncomfortable. FDA and USDA-related estimates have placed U.S. food waste at 133 billion pounds and about $161 billion in 2010, roughly 30 to 40% of the food supply. Those figures are not about one loaf in Jean's kitchen. They are about what happens when millions of small, visible decisions disappear. Stale was not failure. Stale was a deadline. She did not call it upcycling. She called it supper. Number 1 is not just another habit. It is the pause modern industry had to remove. Number 1, the visible finish rule. Number 1 is not a bread trick. It is the rule underneath the whole kitchen. One loaf stayed in one visible place until the household answered for it. Jean's yellow bread box did not merely store bread. It organized behavior. The lid open rule made the loaf visible. The heel slice rule protected it. The paper wrap rule balanced air and moisture. The no fridge rule separated daily use from mistaken storage. The toast rule rescued dryness. The crumb tin turned scraps into ingredients. The mold rule drew the safety line. The freezer rule made saving intentional. The supper rule gave stale bread dignity. All of it came down to one principle: finish what is open before pretending the kitchen is empty. That principle mattered because bread had already become more convenient. Commercial sliced bread appeared in 1928. Historical price tables list bread at about 14.3 cents per pound in 1950, 17.7 cents in 1955, and 20.3 cents in 1960. A loaf was ordinary, but it was not invisible. It carried money, meals, and labor inside it. Modern life did not remove bread. It surrounded it with systems, plastic packaging, clips, resealable bags, freezer bags, bulk buying, grocery delivery, freshness claims, food waste apps, and replacement habits. The plastic bag packaged bread segment alone was valued around $180.7 billion in 2024. And at the same time, the United States still measures food waste in tens of % of the food supply. That is the quiet contradiction. We became better at wrapping bread, labeling bread, shipping bread, freezing bread, and replacing bread. But many kitchens became worse at seeing the open loaf before buying another one. The bread box was not anti-modern. It was not anti-packaging. It was not a cure for waste. It was a visible pause between appetite and purchase. The bread box was not storage. It was a pause.